Welcome to BeFM Drama. This season we're bringing you brand new radio plays adapted from the 22 forgotten winter horror books of Charles Dickens. But the strangest part is, not all of them were written by Charles Dickens. In 1852, he had already realized that he couldn't keep up with a new winter horror novel every year. For a couple of years, he tried to replace them with short essays, but the people craved something more. So he came up with a plan. He outsourced the job. He recruited other writers to create whatever spooky stories they wanted and tied them together with a very loose plot. In this case, it was a family sitting around a fire telling stories. They were then released all together as a special holiday book called A Round of Stories by the Christmas Fire. At the time, only Charles Dickens' name was listed, so people assumed it was all his work, but we've since learned the true identities of the authors. We've already adapted the two tales that Dickens actually wrote, but there are still 8 more stories in this book by other authors. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, some of them are straight up trash. Between the 2 books in this miniseries, there are 4 separate stories where the spooky twist is that a woman married a foreigner, and her family was so upset that they died. But in our quest to be thorough and adapt the parts of this series that have never been adapted before, we're going to use the best bits and pieces of all those tales to create something new. Today's story is based on Somebody's Story by William Moy Thomas, The Old Nurse's Story by Elizabeth Bessie, The Host Story by Edmund Lurcher, The Grandfather Story by Reverend James White, The Charwoman Story by Edmund Saul Dixon, The Deaf Playmate Story by Harriet Martineau, The Guest Story by Samuel Sidney, and The Mother Story by Eliza Griffiths. Since these stories were not written by Dickens, we'll let our main characters Goblin and Fern sit this one out as well, and let another emergency service take over storytelling duties. Please enjoy A Round of Stories from the Fire Department.
Alright everyone, I want you all to listen up over here. Let's welcome a new firefighter to our ranks. Everyone say hi to Lurcher.
Nice to meet you, Proby. I'm Bessie. Welcome to the company.
Thank you kindly.
Lurcher just transferred from, what was the name of that town again?
Gabber.
Never heard of it.
You wouldn't have. It's a tiny little town down south.
Well, welcome to the big city. I hope you can keep up. We get some very weird calls here.
You'd be surprised, I have some stories.
Yeah, I bet. Just you wait, country mouse.
Gabber may not be big, but everybody knows everybody, so we know everybody's stories.
Hold on now. Let's make this interesting. Let's see which fire department has the wildest stories. You each tell your tales. The loser is on scrub duty for the rest of the month.
I thought that the new guy had to do all of the grunt work. That's what you told me when I joined.
What? I'm trying to be fair these days, so let's make it a competition.
Well, that's not fair.
What I mean, it's not fair that I'm fairer to him than I was to you.
Yes.
Hey, you're the one that insists your big city stories are wilder than his small town tales, so you each tell your best ones and you see who wins.
All right, fine. If that's the way it's going to be, I'm game. I'm a good storyteller. I'll win this. No problem.
I reckon I'm in too. You can go first.
All right, let's get this party started.
Well, let's see. Where to begin? You ever had to deal with ghosts, country mouse?
Ghosts?
Well, at least people who believe in ghosts. We've so many people here that think they see them. We're already trying to fight a fire and they have to bring spirits into it. We have enough to worry about.
What did ghosts have to do with fires?
I remember one lady, we were trying to rescue her from a fire, but she refused to leave. She insisted that she'd heard her boss in his office and we had to go and save him. We'd already asked and checked the logs and no one was in that office. Her boss was off overseas on business, but she insisted she'd heard him. She said he had very memorable footsteps. She went in to check, but the door was locked. When she called in to ask if he was back, she heard his voice tell her to get out of the building. So we went in, knocked down the door, and no one was there. She kept insisting that we go back and look again. Finally, just to calm her down, someone from the building called his overseas office to prove to her that he was there, safe and sound, but he wasn't. He died overseas just a few seconds before she'd seen him. She insisted his ghost must have come back to save her.
What was her name?
Oh, I don't know, we just called her the charred woman because she was all singed for the fire. We get lots of calls. I can't remember all of their names.
Well, Gabber is a small town. I know everybody's name.
Wait. I've got a better one. One winter, we had this 6-year-old girl trapped in a burning shed, buried in deep snow. It was so hard to get to her. We put out the fire, but we couldn't find her. We discovered She'd crawled out the window and burrowed to safety in the snow. She was near frozen, but an ambulance came and got her to safety. But the weird part was how she said it happened. We asked her how she'd gotten trapped there and how she knew how to make a burrow like that. She said she'd wandered out in the shed, following the cry of a baby. Somehow she found herself trapped inside, the walls on fire. She said a woman appeared, holding the baby, and showed her how to do it. And when she described the woman and the baby, everyone's faces went white. A woman and a baby who looked exactly like that had died in a fire in that very shed about 50 years earlier. She'd given birth to a mixed-race baby, and her family was incredibly racist. They cast her and the baby out of the house in a horrible snowstorm, and they had taken shelter in the shed and started a fire to keep from freezing to death. When the fire started, they learned that they'd been snowed in. They say the ghost had saved the girl to make up for being unable to save her own daughter. I don't buy it myself, but the girl was saved, so I'll take whatever explanation they give me.
Well, if you believe in the ghost, that's a wild story, but you said you didn't.
There was another time that whole apartment building was on fire. We got most everyone out. But then they were warning me about this deaf kid on the top floor. They said he wouldn't be able to hear the alarms.
Did you find him?
We searched the whole building, top to bottom. Come to find out the kid was safe and sound. He'd actually managed to save most of the other people on his floor because he was the first to notice the fire. He said that the day he found out he was deaf was the best day of his life. He'd spent years thinking something was wrong with him. His teachers called him lazy for not being able to finish his work. His friends called him rude for no laughing at their jokes. Mum said he was inattentive, and his dad said, no one is as deaf as he won't hear. But the week before the fire, he finally got diagnosed. And he finally knew for a fact that he was just fine. It was his ears, not his attitude. He was able to explain himself, rekindle his friendships, and focus on what he could do. Ken? He didn't need to wait for the fire alarms. He smelt the smoke. He felt the heat. He used his senses to get to his family and friends to safety.
Well, that's a heartwarming tale.
Hey, I'm saving the best for later. Let me hear what you've got.
Well, how about if I tell you about a fire that burned down a guy's whole bed and breakfast, and it was the best thing that ever happened to him?
What? Was it insurance fraud?
Nope.
Did this guy really want to get out of running a hotel?
Nope. He'd worked his whole life to build that business. He loved it. But he trusted someone he shouldn't have, and they burned everything he owned to the ground.
All right. I'll bite. Why was a burned down bed and breakfast a dream come true?
Well, to explain that, I first have to tell you about two men.
Aye, here we go. We need a whole backstory, eh?
Back in Gibber, we had this guy named Carl.
You really did know everyone in town, didn't you?
Everybody knew Carl. He lost his whole family in a fire when he was young. You'd think it'd make him hard, but no, not Carl. He was a man who'd give you the shirt off his back. Of course, people took advantage of it, but he always said, good things always come from believing the best in others. He lived by that motto no matter what.
Well, that's not true in my experience.
Well, for example, Carl left town for a couple of years, went up north to another town called Clar.
Carl and Clar.
Yep, Carl wanted to get married to his high school sweetheart, Margaret, but her parents were not too keen on the idea. They had a nice house right on the Gibber River, while Carl lived in a rundown shack in the middle of town. He didn't have any money for a wedding or a house or any of that, so he took some work building bridges up in Clar and headed off for a year. He did great. He was so hard-working, he quickly got promoted, became a project manager. 1 year became 2, 2 years became 3. He saved every dime he made. Lived in a small apartment, never went out drinking, never bought a thing for himself. Just put every last dollar in this old toolbox in his room. Never thought to try and hide it. He thought the best in people. Luckily, the toolbox was so old, rusted, and dented that no one ever thought to steal it. If only they'd known how full of money it was. Finally, after 3 years, he decided it was time to head back home. He would return to Gibber with enough money to buy a house and marry Margaret. He went to his last day of work with his old toolbox in hand. One of the last things he had to do was hire new crew. One of the applicants showed up disheveled. Clothes torn, hair a mess, face smudged with dirt. The guy told him how much he really needed the job and how he promised to work hard. Carl decided to give him a shot. Higher-ups, they didn't like that. They said, "Look at this guy, he's a mess. He's liable to rob us blind." But Carl said, "Good things always come from believing the best in others." They forbid him from hiring the man. But Carl knew he was leaving anyway, and there was no way they could fire him, so he signed the contract.
Is this the guy you trusted that you shouldn't have trusted?
Well, no. The man was not a thief. Quite a hard worker, in fact. But he was a klutz. After half a day of hard work, he saw Carl's toolbox in the office. He figured, that looks like it belongs in the tool shed. He was just trying to help. But as he picked it up, he expected it to be heavy, full of tools. But he was surprised that it was so light. He lost his footing and dropped it right off the bridge, right into the Claw River.
With the money in it and everything?
Yeah, Carl ran into the river after it, but the toolbox had already been washed away down the river into the caves. No one knew where the river flowed to after it entered those dark, old, dangerous caves, so it was gone forever. Carl had lost everything, and now he was out of a job. He had no choice but to head back home to Geber, penniless.
I thought this was supposed to be a story about a fire.
I'm getting there.
Aye, slowly.
He showed up at Margaret's house and tried to explain what happened. He begged her to marry him anyway, but her parents told him off. They didn't believe a word of his story. Figure he'd spent it all or hadn't even made it to begin with. He left their house dejected and went into the backyard to sit by the river. And there, sitting on the bank, was a toolbox.
Don't tell me it was the same toolbox.
The same dents, the same rust, the very same one. And the money still inside.
How would it end up at his girlfriend's mum's house?
Well, it turns out that Carl had solved the mystery of where the river Clar flowed to. Clar and Geber were one and the same. It's a big deal. Two towns had a festival and both mayors gave him the keys to their cities. He got a big reward too for the discovery. Enough to have a beautiful wedding, to upgrade his dream house into dream bed and breakfast that he and Margaret ran together.
Dang. Guess he got lucky, eh?
He paid for the place in cash. And on the way, he almost lost the money again. But that's a whole other story.
Well, this is a storytelling competition, so go for it. Hopefully this part actually has fire in it.
We're getting to that part. So Carl carried this toolbox full of cash across town to the bank. And on the way, someone cornered him in the alley with a knife. The guy screamed at him, "Give me $20.
Gah, what a time to get mugged, eh?
You said it. The guy had no idea about the toolbox full of cash. But to get the $20, Carl would have to open the toolbox and the guy would see the rest of it.
What did he do? Did he fight the guy off?
He opened the toolbox, took out $20 and handed it over. The mugger said thank you and walked away.
That's it? That's the story? What an anticlimax. And what about the fire?
No, that wasn't the end. Carl called after him.
Well, why on earth would he do that?
He asked the man, "You saw all of this money. Why did you only ask for $20? The man said, "That's all I need." Turns out the guy needed medicine for his sick kid. Carl figured the guy was so honest, he offered him a job in his bed and breakfast.
So that's the guy you trusted that he shouldn't have.
Nope, that guy turned into a trusted employee for many years.
Listen, is this another side story? How many stories does it take you to get to the point? When does the bed and breakfast burn down?
I just wanted to explain this guy's mindset. He trusted everyone, and it always worked out for him in weird, twisty little ways.
Well, you could have just told me that, no?
All right, fine. Let me get to the guy you shouldn't trust. A one-handed man named Peter.
A one-handed man, aye. All right, what's Peter's deal?
Peter also traveled to make his fortune, but his trade was theft. He sometimes worked as a con man, once faked a treasure map and convinced an entire town to finance his trip to South America to uncover buried gold in exchange for part ownership of the loot. He just took their cash and disappeared. More often, though, he wouldn't waste time with all the extra work and would just steal it.
Damn Peter, eh? Oof.
Worst of all was how he avoided getting caught. Arson.
All right, now we're getting to the good stuff. Well, I mean, you know what I mean. Arson, obviously not good, but related to the topic at hand, okay.
Rather than worry about cameras and fingerprints, after he robbed a place, he'd just burn it to the ground, hoping to destroy all the evidence with it.
Oof, yikes.
So one day, this guy came to Geber. He had around $700,000 in stolen money and a bag of diamonds in a suitcase. But he was so greedy he didn't want to spend even a few bucks of it for a hotel. So he showed up at the bed and breakfast looking for a handout. Peter claimed to be penniless and just needed a place to stay. Tried using his missing hand to get sympathy, but he needn't have. Kind old Carl gave him a free room without a second thought. Good things always come from believing the best in others.
Oh no.
Yep. After Carl and Margaret went to bed, Peter ransacked the place. Carl didn't even have much. He put everything into the inn. He had no interest in fancy jewelry or expensive things, but Peter was just so greedy that no matter how much he had, he always wanted more. He took worthless paintings off the walls, stole candlesticks and silverware. Then he set the place ablaze.
Oh no.
On his way out, he happened to glance in one of the rooms and see the 2 keys to the city.
What? Aren't those just decorations? No?
Yeah, they're not much more than wall decorations, purely ceremonial. But they're painted gold, and Peter, he wanted them. So he stopped his escape to go dismount them from the wall. Well, the fire spread faster than he thought. While Carl and Margaret heard the alarm and got out, Peter was now trapped inside the burning building. That's when I arrived to put out the fire. As we started putting it out, we heard a crash. Peter came flying through the second-story window. He landed on the ground with a loud thud. Looked like he broke a few things in the process. He was badly burned and frightened, but he took one look at us and ran off into the woods in fear of getting caught.
So what happened? Did you catch the guy? I mean, did you save the house?
Nope, Peter got away, and the bed and breakfast was too far gone to be saved.
So how was this the best thing that had ever happened to him? For the life of me.
Well, after all was said and done, we found a bag on the lawn, pretty close to where Peter had fallen. Inside were all of Carl's things, and a briefcase with $700,000 and a bag of diamonds in it.
Peter's money?
Well, who can say for sure whose money it was? I certainly can't say I saw Peter drop it. We couldn't track down where it had been stolen from, and since no one could testify to whose it was, if no one claimed it, the bag would go to the property owner. We waited a month to allow the owner of the bag to go down to the police department to claim it, but no one did.
So Carl got everything.
He invested it well, helped out the community, and now he's one of the wealthiest men in town. As Carl says, good things always come from believing the best in others.
Oh, that's a pretty good story. I think he's got you beat there, Bessie.
Wait. No. Listen, I'm not done yet. I'm just getting started.
Uh-oh. We'll have to continue this later, though. That's the alarm. We got a fire to fight.
I'll get you next time, Lurcher.
Thank you for listening to BeFM Drama. This was A Round of Stories from the Fire Department, based on A Round of Stories by the Christmas Fire, by Thomas, Bessie, Lurcher, White, Dixon, Martineau, Sidney, and Griffiths, who were anonymous in the original release. You know what? I didn't realize until just now seeing those names that they actually did find a way to sneak their names into the book. 2 of the characters in both the original book and this radio play were named after some of those anonymous authors. This radio play was written by me, Ryan Estrada. It starred Laura McLucky as Bessie and me as Lurcher and Bernard. Hidden Agenda, Loopster, Marty Got's a Plan, On the Ground, Walking Alone, and Cool Vibes are by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech and released under Creative Commons Attribution License. Tune in next time for another round of stories from the Fire Department, all taken from this book's sequel. Then next week, Goblin Fern will return for more Dickens adaptations. Thank you for listening to BeFM Drama.